Welcome to Thalira Tales, where stories bloom in silence, carrying emotion, mystery, and hidden truth. Step in and let the tale unfold.
I woke up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water and accidentally heard my husband whispering to his mistress. "Don't worry, honey. Tomorrow this 7500 square foot estate will be all yours." Just hours later, my mother-in-law would receive a call from the hospital. Her son had been in a fatal car crash. My in-laws froze in shock. If I hadn't heard it with my own ears, I probably would have believed until the day I died that my husband was a decent man. But that night, in the dead silence of our massive suburban estate, I heard his voice. "Don't worry, my love. I'll make sure she dies. The house and all the money in the bank accounts. As soon as I take care of her, it will all be yours." The man saying those words was my husband. My name is Emily. I was 32 years old and worked as an accountant at a small local firm. My husband, Jason, was 3 years older and owned his own logistics company. Business was booming. We had been married for 5 years and lived with his parents in a sprawling, luxurious estate in Bellevue, Washington, complete with a massive backyard, a swimming pool, and a 3-car garage. Anyone looking from the outside would say, I had won the lottery. I had married a successful man from a wealthy family. My father-in-law, Arthur, was a stern man of few words, but every word he spoke hit like a hammer. My mother-in-law, Carol, was a petite woman, but her tongue was sharp, always complaining about her children and her life. In 5 years of marriage, the only thing that made me keep my head down around her was the topic of children. We didn't have any. Carol would drop frequent hints. "What kind of woman are you? 5 years married and not a single child. At this rate, this family won't have a legacy. You need to get yourself checked, Emily." All I could do was grit my teeth, smile politely, and cry silently into my pillow at night. I had tried countless treatments and visited one fertility clinic after another, but the result was always the same. "We don't see any obvious issues. Just keep tracking your cycles." I blamed myself entirely, never daring to think the problem might not be with me. In that house, the person I feared most was my father-in-law. The person who exhausted me the most was my mother-in-law. And the person I trusted above all else was my husband, Jason. Or at least, that's what I thought. That night, I was sleeping when thirst woke me up. I reached out to the other side of the bed, and only found a cold emptiness. The sheets on Jason's side were smooth, with no trace of warmth. I rubbed my eyes and glanced at the glowing digital clock on the nightstand. 3:10 a.m. The house was plunged in darkness. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the central air conditioning. I pushed back the covers, slipped on my slippers, and went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. The second-floor hallway was long and dark, with a yellowish nightlight in the corner casting a dim glow. As I passed Jason's home office, I noticed a thin line of bluish light spilling out from under the door. Was he still working? That was my first thought. His company had a huge contract coming up, and he often complained about being exhausted. Seeing him stay up so late, I just wanted to tell him to rest so he wouldn't get sick. I was about to raise my hand to knock, the words already forming on my lips. "Honey, come down and get some water. Take a break." But my hand never touched the doorknob. From inside, his familiar, deep voice resonated, but it had a sickly sweet tone he had never used with me. "Don't worry, my love. Tomorrow, everything will be taken care of. Starting tomorrow, there won't be anyone standing in our way." I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand paralyzed in the air. My love? Who is he calling my love? My heart pounded violently, and a cold chill ran up my spine to the nape of my neck. I swallowed hard, held my breath, and slowly pressed my ear against the cold wood of the door. Jason's voice sounded again, lower this time, laced with a dark satisfaction. "I have it all figured out. Up on that mountain pass heading into the Cascades. If it rains even a little, the car slips easily. The state troopers will think it was a tragic accident caused by losing control. No one will suspect a thing." My hands and feet went numb. The Cascades. A mountain pass. An accident. Tomorrow was our 5th wedding anniversary. He had told me he was taking me to a luxury spa resort up in the mountains, a hotel with views of the pine forests, to make up for all the years of sadness over our fertility struggles. I had been so happy, I cried, packing my heavy coats and scarves, even telling my mother-in-law, Mom, we're going away for a couple of days. Take care, and don't forget your medication. It turned out that this anniversary celebration was actually my carefully planned funeral. From inside, a woman's voice filtered through his phone's speaker, low but clear, with a coquettish edge. But what if she doesn't die? I'm so scared, Jason. I don't want to go to prison. Jason let out a soft chuckle. It was the same laugh he usually reserved for business deals, but now it sounded incredibly sweet. Silly, I've looked into it perfectly. On that cliff, if the car goes over, it gets totaled. Impossible to survive. Once she's dead, the 7,500 square foot estate and the millions in the accounts under my name, I'll transfer it all to you. You just have to sit tight and wait to be my wife. You promised me, okay? Don't trick me. The woman on the other end giggled foolishly. Every word, the estate, the millions, all for you was like an ice pick driving through my heart. It turned out that to my husband, I was nothing more than an obstacle. The house I cleaned with such care, scrubbing every tile and tending to every plant, was just a bargaining chip. 5 years of being the dutiful daughter-in-law, enduring insults, all to end up as the target of a perfect plot to be thrown off a cliff. I clamped both hands over my mouth, terrified a scream would escape. I felt my back sliding against the door. Inside, Jason whispered again. Tomorrow I'll give her a mild sedative. By the time we hit the mountain pass, she'll be half asleep. If anything happens, it'll look even more like a natural accident. Just remember, leave no trace on your phone. Got it? Be a good girl at home and wait for me to bring you the papers to sign. I couldn't listen anymore. If I did, I would collapse right there. My knees suddenly gave out, and I slid down the cold wall, sitting heavily on the hallway runner. The carpet was soft, but it felt as if I were sitting on razor blades. Images swirled in my mind. Our wedding day at the luxury downtown hotel, him holding my hand, looking into my eyes and saying, I will never abandon you. The times my stomach ached from the fertility meds and he'd bring me warm water, saying, one last push, honey. Soon we'll have a baby. The nights I waited up for him until dawn, and he would hug me, apologizing. It was a late business dinner. Don't be mad. Was all of that real, or just a long, elaborate stage play? In this house, the person I hated and feared the most had always been Carol, my mother-in-law. Because of her passive-aggressive remarks and her judgmental stares at my flat stomach, I often secretly thought, if I ever have to leave this house, it'll be because of you. But it turned out the person who wanted to wipe me off the face of the earth was the man I slept next to every night and ate breakfast with every morning. I don't know how long I sat in the hallway. The hum of the AC and the ticking of the wall clock seemed to amplify in the night, piercing my ears. In the office, the light stayed on a while longer, then went out with a click. I heard the scraping of a chair and familiar footsteps approaching the door. Like a drowning person suddenly reacting, I scrambled back to the bedroom. My movements were clumsy. I almost tripped several times, but I managed to reach the bed, slip under the covers, and turn my back to the door. The bedroom door opened with a soft click. I heard Jason's footsteps, slow and calm. Just as always. The mattress dipped beside me. The smell of tobacco mixed with his usual cologne drifted toward my back. His arm reached out, preparing to hold me like he always did. My entire body went rigid. Every muscle trembled slightly. Emily? Are you still awake? His voice was soft, a little raspy. I forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat, trying to imitate a groggy voice. I was thirsty. I got up to go to the bathroom. I'm going back to sleep now. You should sleep too. Jason stayed silent for a moment, then pulled his arm back. Yeah. We're leaving early tomorrow. Get some sleep. He rolled over, turning his back to me. A few minutes later, his breathing grew deep and steady, as if he were truly asleep. I, on the other hand, lay in the dark, with my eyes wide open, staring at the faint light filtering through the crack in the curtains. I felt freezing cold, yet my mind had never been so sharply awake. The mountain pass, the accident, the sedatives, the estate, the millions. Wait for me to bring you the papers. Every word Jason said, every laugh from that woman, was branded into my brain with a hot iron. I couldn't even cry anymore. The initial tears had soaked my pillow, and as they dried, all that was left was a freezing bitterness spreading through my chest. a profound hatred and a painful, agonizing clarity. Before, I had always thought that if I couldn't take the pressure anymore, I would just get a divorce. I would walk away empty-handed. But I would walk away. I never imagined someone would want to deny me the right to even live. Outside, the sky began to lighten, shifting from dark purple to pale gray, speckled with the gold of the first sun. A bird chirped faintly in the yard. I stayed perfectly still, pretending to sleep so I wouldn't have to look at the face of the man who had planned my murder. Only when a crystal-clear thought formed in my head did my body slowly begin to relax. I will go on that trip tomorrow, but not to die. I will live. I will protect myself, and I will make them pay for every single thing they've plotted against my life. That thought was like a small flame igniting in the long night, warming my frozen heart. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow on that mountain highway, but I knew that from the moment I heard that conversation, I was no longer the submissive, resigned wife. I would live, and I would take back everything that belonged to me, my way. The next morning, I couldn't remember if I had managed to sleep at all. I only know that when the alarm went off, my head felt heavy, stuffed with cotton, but strangely clear. Beside me, Jason was still lying there, his eyes closed, breathing evenly. If I hadn't heard last night's conversation, I probably would have rolled over to gently wake him, like so many other mornings. But today, I simply got up in silence, trying not to shift the mattress an inch. I went into the bathroom and closed the door, gripping the edges of the sink. In the mirror, my face showed sunken eyes with red rims and dry lips. I stared at myself for a long time, whispering as if talking to a stranger. My phone was still on the nightstand. Last night, amidst the panic in the hallway, I somehow had the presence of mind to open the voice memo app and slip the phone into my pajama pocket. When I got back into bed, before pretending to sleep, I had stopped the recording. Now, sitting on the lid of the toilet with trembling hands, I opened the audio file. Jason's voice played out, word for word, as clear as if he were whispering right into my ear. Once she's dead, the 7500 square foot estate and all the money will be yours. I listened to it once, then again. My ears rang, but strangely, my heart calmed down. It was the proof. I hadn't dreamt it. I hadn't imagined it. I saved the file in a hidden folder under a random name and sent a copy to Sarah, my best friend, through an encrypted messaging app, along with a single text. Keep this safe. It's urgent. Don't ask any questions. I'll call you this afternoon, Sarah replied instantly. Sure thing. Saved. Are you okay? I stared at those 3 words. Are you okay? For a long time, and finally replied, yes, for now. I washed my face with cold water so the swelling around my eyes would go down and my voice would stop shaking. When I walked out, Jason had just sat up in bed, his hair messy, pretending to rub the sleep from his eyes. You're up early, he smiled, using the same gentle tone as always. We're leaving early today to beat the traffic. I turned away so he wouldn't see my eyes, answering simply, yeah, I'm going to pack our things. No need. I already packed everything. You just need your toiletries. If it had been yesterday, that sentence would have touched my heart. A husband who packs the luggage for a romantic getaway. Now, that I already packed everything just sent shivers down my spine. I had no idea what exactly he had packed to end my life. I dressed in comfortable clothes and applied light makeup to hide my exhaustion. I opened the closet and chose a cream-colored turtleneck sweater. The exact same one Jason once told me made me look like a 20-year-old college girl. I didn't wear it to please him, but because today I needed to be completely lucid, with every detail under my control. When I went down to the kitchen, Carol was already up, giving orders to the housekeeper about breakfast. The smell of toast, sunny-side-up eggs, and freshly brewed coffee floated in the air. Arthur sat at the head of the table, his eyes glued to the morning paper, as usual. Seeing me enter, Carol shot me an indifferent look. You're finally down. Eat something before you go. Traffic up in the mountains is a nightmare. I nodded and sat down. Jason, who was a few steps behind me, pulled my chair out and placed a plate with the most perfect sunny-side-up egg in front of me. Eat up. We have a long drive today. I looked at the egg, thinking about the sedative he mentioned last night. My stomach dropped, but my face held a smile and my voice sounded light. You too, honey. At that moment, Arthur folded his newspaper, took off his glasses, and looked at us. "What time are you leaving?" Jason answered quickly. "Dad, I was thinking around 9. Arthur nodded, speaking slowly with a tone caught between advice and a warning. "Those roads up Snoqualmie Pass are treacherous, especially if it rains. Drive carefully. Don't get overconfident. One bad slip and you're going down a ravine." The fork trembled in my hand. He mentioned the mountain pass, the slipping, the ravine. Was it a coincidence, or did he know? I glanced sideways to catch Jason's reaction. He just smiled with absolute confidence. "Relax, Dad. I've been driving for over a decade. I checked the weather. It'll be sunny and the roads will be dry. Don't worry. I'll keep Emily safe." The word safe echoed in my ears like a cruel joke. I lowered my gaze, cut a tiny piece of egg, and pushed it to the edge of the plate. Then I picked up a piece of dry toast and dipped it in the yolk. Today, I had to control everything. I didn't know where he would put the drug, but I promised myself not to touch anything that tasted even remotely strange. After a few bites, I put my fork down and rubbed my stomach. "Mom, my stomach's been bothering me lately. I'm going to eat light so I don't get carsick." Carol side-eyed me, ready to make a passive-aggressive comment, but seeing her husband's stern look, she swallowed it and just sighed. "Suit yourself. Just be careful and come back in one piece." I stood up and told Jason, "Finish eating. I'm going to grab a couple of things and I'll be right down." Back in the bedroom, I locked the door. I pulled a small handbag from a drawer and slipped inside my passport, some cash, and the audio file that I had already copied onto a tiny USB drive while in the bathroom. I didn't know how this trip would unfold, but I knew I could no longer trust anyone in this house. Before heading downstairs, I sent another message to Sarah. "If I don't call you tonight, open that file and take it straight to the police or a lawyer. Don't trust anyone." On the other end, a brief typing appeared, and then, "Got it. Waiting for your call." I took a deep breath, shoved my phone into my jacket pocket, and went downstairs. Jason had already taken the suitcases down and was waiting by the front door with a smile. "Ready, Emily? Let's hit the road." I nodded. "Yes, let's go." In the garage, he opened the car door for me with the same chivalry he showed on our wedding day. I slid into the passenger seat, buckled my seatbelt tightly, and took a quick glance at the cup holders, the thermos, and the pack of gum. Whatever he offered me today, I would have to think twice. The car backed out of the driveway and merged onto the street. The morning sun in Seattle was already starting to bite. Jason turned on some soft music, the same playlist of romantic songs he always played on road trips. "What's wrong?" "You're awfully quiet," Jason said, glancing at me with a smile. "Nervous?" "It's the first time we're taking a trip just the two of us in a while." I turned and forced a smile, just a little tired. "I didn't sleep well last night. Don't worry, I'm right here with you. You're going to love this trip. It'll make you forget all our troubles." That I'm right here with you that had been my safe haven for years now made me nauseous. I turned my face toward the window so he wouldn't see the disgust in my eyes. The highway was clear. Jason drove confidently, occasionally turning to ask, "Do you want some water?" I shook my head. "No thanks. I don't want us to have to pull over." He didn't insist. A while later, he opened the glove compartment, pulled out a blister pack with 2 white pills, and handed them to me along with a small water bottle. "These are for motion sickness. A doctor friend gave them to me. Take them so you don't feel sick on the mountain curves." The pills were in a generic foil blister pack. No box, no label. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Did you take yours?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I don't need them. I'm used to the drive," he smiled. "You take them. You'll sleep for a bit. And by the time we get there, you'll feel brand new." I pretended to hesitate for a moment, then set the blister pack on the center console. "I'll take them when we get closer to the pass. If I take them now, I'll wake up halfway there." Jason looked at me, and for a split second, I saw something strange flash in his eyes, something that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He smiled again. "Whatever you want, just remember to take them before we start the climb." I turned away, hiding the hand that was clenching tightly in my lap. I knew I couldn't take those pills, but I couldn't refuse them too aggressively either. The sun climbed higher, the light growing brighter as the highway began its ascent. On both sides, the deep green of the pine forests began to emerge. In the distance, the jagged silhouettes of the Cascades cut against the sky. This was the place I had dreamed of visiting on quiet weekend getaways with the man I loved. Jason lowered the volume of the music and cleared his throat. Emily, when we start heading up the pass, if you're tired, recline your seat and get some sleep. Honestly, I hope this trip is a fresh start for us. A fresh start. He said it with such sincerity that, if it weren't for the audio file in my pocket, I might have believed him. I didn't respond immediately. A while later, I asked in a casual tone, Jason, if something ever happened to me, what would you do? Jason seemed to tense up at the wheel for a fraction of a second, then let out a laugh. What kind of question is that? If something happened to you, why would I even want to keep living? Come on, don't say crazy things. I stared at his profile, feeling a bizarre sensation, as if I were sitting next to a complete stranger. The face was familiar, but his soul was so dark I couldn't recognize it. The car began to exit the interstate, taking a smaller state route. A sign reading Snoqualmie Pass, 60 miles appeared, and quickly vanished behind us. Suddenly, the phone in my pocket vibrated. I pulled it out and saw one word on the screen. Carol. Why was my mother-in-law calling me at this hour? I looked at Jason. It's Mom. I should answer. Put it on speaker, he said, keeping his eyes on the road. I hit the accept button and turned on the speakerphone. Hi, Mom. The voice on the other end wasn't her usual complaining tone, but a choked sob, accompanied by background noise that sounded like a busy hospital. Emily. Is that you, honey? Where are you? Are you with Jason? I jumped slightly. Yes, Mom. We're on our way to the mountains. We just left the city. What's wrong? Carol's voice cracked. Oh my God, how could this happen? The hospital. The hospital just called me. They said my son, that Jason was in a car accident and died. They told me to come down and identify the body. Emily, what is going on? What? I froze. The phone almost slipped from my grasp. Beside me, Jason slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched, the car skidded onto the shoulder, and came to a violent halt. We both lurched forward. He snatched the phone from my hand, his face pale as wax. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm right here. Who died? What accident? Mom, stop talking nonsense. Carol's sobs grew louder, mixing with the murmurs of a crowd and a hospital PA system. They called me. They gave me his full name and his license plate number. They said Jason crashed and the car caught on fire. Emily. Jason. Oh my God. I turned to look at Jason. I saw the veins popping out on his forehead, his knuckles turning white from gripping the phone so hard. Name. License plate. They were confirming it was Jason. Meanwhile, he was sitting right next to me in a different car, facing the news of his own death. In that instant, a chilling realization hit me. His perfect plan to kill me in the mountains seemed to have hit an unforeseen snag, and the first one to be declared dead was him. Jason kept the phone pressed to his ear, his lips trembling. Mom, listen to me. I am in the car. I didn't have an accident. Calm down. But on the other end, Carol's voice was pure chaos, swallowed by the noise of rushing footsteps. They gave me his full name. The plate. A car registered in your name. The doctor is waiting. Mom's coming right now. Oh my God. The line abruptly went dead. The air inside our car grew so thick it felt like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water over us in broad daylight. The engine continued to idle with a low rumble, but the two of us were paralyzed. Jason slowly turned to look at me, an expression of utter bewilderment on his face, one I had never seen before. Emily, did you hear what Mom just said? Who died? I looked back at him, feeling a mix of cold detachment and cruel lucidity. I answered slowly. I heard her perfectly. She said you died. Jason let out a dry, hacking laugh, a sound that seemed to get stuck in his throat. That's ridiculous. I'm sitting right here. How can I be dead? He threw the car into drive and slammed the gas pedal. The car peeled off the shoulder, but barely covered a few dozen yards before he slowed down again and pulled over. His hands began to shake violently, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were snow white. Impossible. A coincidence like this doesn't exist. I watched his profile, my heart ice cold. The man who last night calmly plotted how to kill me in a ravine was now terrified by the news of his own demise. An idea sparked in my mind, crystal clear. Someone had beaten him to the punch, and that someone was either the woman on the phone or someone in his own family. I feigned a trembling voice. Maybe Mom misunderstood. Maybe it's just someone with the same name and a similar plate. Jason nodded rapidly, as if grasping at straws. Yes, that's it. It has to be a mix-up. It can't all match. Nothing happened to me. But he didn't even sound like he believed his own words. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a call from a hospital extension. Jason stared at the screen, his hand hovering over it for a second before he answered. Hello? On the other end, a stern male voice spoke. Mr. Jason? I'm the ER attending at County General. I apologize, but could you please come down here immediately? We have a victim from a traffic collision, and all the vehicle registration and IDs are under your name. Your family has just arrived for the identification. Jason went totally rigid, his voice cracking. That's me. You're talking to me right now. I wasn't in an accident. What are you talking about? The doctor paused, then spoke slowly. We are calling based on the vehicle's registry and the recovered wallet. The victim suffered severe thermal burns. Visual identification is very difficult. The family is insisting the victim is their son. That is to say, you. If you are alive and somewhere else, you need to come to the hospital immediately to clear this up. The call ended in a suffocating silence. Jason dropped the phone, staring blankly ahead, his chest rising and falling heavily, as if he couldn't get enough air. I clearly saw a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Emily, someone is using my car. I looked at him and shivered. The wrecked car was in his name. The dead person inside was so badly burned they were unrecognizable. And at the hospital, his family already assumed it was him. Someone had arranged a substitute death for him. At that moment, I remembered the words Jason had said to that woman last night. On that cliff, if the car goes over, it gets totaled. Impossible to survive. A perfect plan. Except the person who went off the road wasn't me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice as normal as possible. So what are you going to do now? Jason gritted his teeth, his face turning hard and icy. We have to go straight back to the hospital. I can't let this become a reality. He whipped the car around immediately. The road to the mountains, which we had barely started to climb, was left behind. He slammed the accelerator, the engine roaring with urgency. There was no soft music playing anymore, just the whine of the tires and the pounding of our hearts. During the drive back, Jason made call after call. He called my mother-in-law, but no one answered. He called my father-in-law, but his phone went straight to voicemail. He called his company dispatcher, but the number was unreachable. He even tried calling the other woman, but only got an automated message that the phone was turned off or out of range. Every unanswered call was like a dagger twisting the panic in his eyes. I remained silent beside him, my mind a mess. A flood of questions assaulted me. Who had killed Jason on paper? Where did the wrecked car come from? Who was the dead person? And most importantly, if Jason had been declared dead, was his plan to kill me in the mountains still active? Or was I now caught in a much larger, deadlier trap? When we got closer to the hospital, the traffic of ambulances and pedestrians thickened. From a distance, I spotted Carol's figure. She was sitting in a plastic chair outside the ER entrance, her hair disheveled, her face buried in her hands. Beside her stood Arthur, his face pale, his shoulders slouched as if he were carrying an invisible boulder. Jason parked abruptly, threw open the door, and sprinted out of the car. I followed him. Dad! Mom! He yelled. Carol's head snapped up. The moment she saw Jason standing in front of her, she froze, as if struck by lightning. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Her lips quivered. Jason? Oh my God! She stumbled to her feet, ran to her son, and hugged him, weeping and pounding on his back. You're really alive! Then, who? Who is in there? Arthur approached too, his usually severe eyes red-rimmed. He placed a heavy hand on Jason's shoulder, his voice raspy. If you're out here, it means the man in there isn't you. Jason nodded, his jaw tight. Nothing happened to me, Dad. But it's obvious someone used my second car and my info to stage a crash. I hung back a few steps, watching the parents embrace their son through their tears. I didn't feel any warmth, only an intensifying cold. I realized that in that moment, to them, Jason's life was everything. I was still an outsider, a daughter-in-law standing on the periphery. The attending doctor from earlier stepped out, looked at Jason, then down at his clipboard in astonishment. "You're Jason?" Jason nodded. The doctor let out a long sigh. "Then the individual in the morgue is not you. But the vehicle registration, the driver's license recovered. Everything is under your name. It's possible they are forged documents, or someone deliberately staged the scene." Carol collapsed into Arthur's arms again, her voice breaking. Then someone is trying to hurt my son?" The doctor didn't answer directly, simply stating that the police would need to be involved. Hearing the word police, I saw Jason flinch slightly. A shadow of deep anxiety crossed his eyes, but he quickly masked it. However, I had seen it. I understood that if they investigated deeply, not only would the fake accident come to light, but sooner or later, someone would uncover his mountain plot. The state police arrived shortly after. They had cordoned off the site of the burned vehicle, taken photos, and collected statements. They invited Jason into a private room for questioning. Before walking in, he turned and looked at me. His gaze was no longer the gentle one from the morning, nor the panicked one from when he got the news. In his eyes, I saw a cold, calculating machine rebooting. Suddenly, I understood. To him, this game of life and death had just begun. While Jason gave his statement to the police, I stayed with his parents in the waiting room. Carol hadn't fully recovered. She gripped my hand tightly, her voice cracking. "Emily, you saw it. I almost lost my boy." I looked at her trembling hand, feeling a profound sense of irony. Last night, the very son she was clinging to had meticulously planned every step to lead me to my death. But I said nothing. I just answered softly, "Yes, Mom. They'll figure everything out." Down the hall, the morgue doors swung open, and orderlies wheeled out a gurney covered by a white sheet. Beneath that sheet was the person who had died in Jason's place. I followed the gurney with my eyes, a paralyzing chill washing over me. Who was that person? Why did they have to die like that? And was their death directly connected to the woman on the phone? At that moment, I became certain of one thing. Since Jason was declared dead, the fate of everyone involved had veered off course. And that trip to the Mount Zeke, cut short, hadn't just ended, it was about to trigger a series of far more terrifying events. I stared at the door of the interrogation room where Jason sat with the detectives, and thought to myself, "You wanted me to die in a ravine, but now you are the one standing at the crossroads of life and death." Jason was in that room for nearly an hour before he walked out. When the door opened, I looked up and met his gaze. The initial panic had vanished, replaced by a forced calm, the look of a man trying desperately to regain control. My father-in-law jumped up. "What happened, son?" "What did the detectives say?" Jason shook his head, his voice strained. "They just took my initial statement. Dad, the car is in my name, the IDs are mine. So they need to verify everything very carefully. For now, they haven't drawn any conclusions." My mother-in-law grabbed his arm. "Then who is the dead person, honey?" Jason stared at the floor for several seconds before answering. "They don't know, Mom. He's completely unrecognizable because of the fire. We have to wait for the DNA results." Hearing that, Carol slumped back into her chair, her face so pale it looked as if she had been drained of blood. I stepped forward to support her. The moment my hand touched hers, I felt a strange pang of pity. Pity for a mother who had been on the brink of losing her son, completely unaware that this same son had plotted to murder his wife. The police requested that Jason not leave the city limits while they investigated. The anniversary trip to the mountains was officially canceled. Jason drove us back to the house. The car moved much slower than on the way out, and the atmosphere inside was suffocating. No one spoke a word. When we arrived, the massive estate felt unusually cold. As soon as the front door closed, my mother-in-law dropped onto the sofa, pressing a hand to her forehead, muttering, "Oh my God! What is happening? What is all this?" My father-in-law, leaning against the back of the sofa, told Jason in a gravelly voice. Go upstairs and rest, son. Your mother is very shaken. Whatever this is, we'll deal with it tomorrow. Jason nodded and turned to me. Emily, you should go up and rest too. You must be exhausted. I looked at him and gave a slight nod, without saying a word. When I reached the bedroom and closed the door, I felt all my strength abandon me. I leaned against the doorframe and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. In a single morning, my entire world had flipped upside down. His plot to kill me hadn't been executed because he himself had been declared dead by proxy. I realized that what I knew was only the tip of the iceberg. Behind Jason, behind the woman on the phone, there was another hand at play, more discreet, more ruthless, and willing to kill to achieve its goal. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Sarah. I listened to the audio you sent me. Emily, where are you? Did something happen? I swallowed hard, my voice dropping to a whisper as I called her. I'm not dead yet. But everything is a disaster. I'll call you tonight and explain everything. Be careful, Emily. What you sent me is no joke. I hung up, pocketed my phone, and walked into the bathroom. In the mirror, I was still me, but my eyes were different. They were no longer the eyes of a gullible, submissive, terrified wife. Now, there was a relentless vigilance in them. I had just changed my clothes when there was a knock at the door. Emily? It was my mother-in-law. I opened the door. She stood there, her eyes puffy, holding a steaming mug of herbal tea. Drink this, sweetheart. You haven't eaten anything all day. I took the mug, replying softly, Thank you, Mom. She stared at me for a long time, then suddenly burst into tears again. Emily, I almost lost my boy. I thought Jason was dead. I stood perfectly still, the liquid in the mug trembling in rhythm with my hands. Mom, if the person in the crash today had been me, what would you have thought? The question slipped out, surprising even me. Carol froze for a second, then shook her head. What are you saying? Jason and you are husband and wife. It would be a tragedy. I don't even want to think about it. Her answer was evasive. I understood then that in her heart, her son would always be the center of the universe. Even after 5 years of being her daughter-in-law, I would always be on the outside. She patted my shoulder. Go on, get some rest. The next few days are going to be very difficult for this family. She turned and walked away. I watched her go, feeling completely empty. Dinner was served, but barely anyone touched their plates. My father-in-law took a couple of bites and set his fork down. My mother-in-law stared off into space, sighing intermittently. Jason didn't take his eyes off his phone, constantly making and receiving texts. I noticed that every time it buzzed, his eyes grew tight. When he thought no one was looking, he would step out onto the balcony and talk for long stretches. Around 9 o'clock, he came back to the bedroom. As soon as he closed the door, he approached me. I instinctively took a step back. Emily, were you really scared today? He asked, his voice deep, attempting to show genuine concern. I looked at him, fighting to maintain my composure. Anyone would be scared hearing their husband died. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I never thought I'd see the day I received news of my own death. Emily, it looks like someone is coming after me. A bitter smile formed in my mind. It's not that someone is coming after you. It's that you started this game. But out loud, I just said, I just hope they figure it out soon. I'm very tired. Jason studied me. His eyes darkened for a split second. Then he nodded. Get some sleep. I didn't sleep that night. The wind rustled through the backyard trees, and the chirping of crickets only amplified my anxiety. Through the window, I saw the light from his office balcony was still on. He was awake again. Around 1 a.m., my phone vibrated softly. A text from an unknown number. If you want to know who died in your husband's place, be at the diner across from the hospital tomorrow at 7 a.m. Come alone. Don't tell anyone. My heart seized. I read the message over and over. The face of the woman from the phone call flashed in my mind. But my gut told me she wasn't the one who sent this. I glanced toward the balcony. A thin sliver of light cut across the bedroom floor. Jason was still absorbed in his secret phone calls. totally unaware that another door in this nightmare was about to open. I deleted the text, put the phone away, and closed my eyes. I didn't feel a vague, formless fear anymore. I felt a cold, sharp anticipation. I knew that starting tomorrow, I wouldn't just be the prey. I would become the hunter. The next morning, I woke up at 5. The sky was still blanketed in fog, and the air in the bedroom was unusually cold. Beside me, Jason was still sleeping with his back to me. His face, in the dim light, looked so peaceful, as if the horrific events of the past few days hadn't touched him. If it weren't for the text on my phone, I might have wondered if yesterday was just a fever dream. I slipped out of bed silently, tiptoeing so as not to wake him. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face for a long time to wake myself up. The message from the unknown number reappeared on my screen. 7 a.m. Alone. Diner across from the hospital. Nothing more. Whoever sent it knew my schedule. They knew I was local. I gripped my phone. If I didn't go, I might never find out who died in Jason's place. If I did go, I wasn't sure I'd make it back in one piece. I threw on a simple pair of jeans and a light jacket, grabbing my purse. Down in the kitchen, my mother-in-law was already up brewing tea. Seeing me, she looked surprised. "Where are you going so early?" I tilted my head, keeping my voice soft. "Just running out to get us some fresh pastries for breakfast." She nodded without probing further. Her mind was entirely consumed with worry for her son. I walked out of the estate under the pale dawn light, my heart beating faster with every step. The diner was right across from County General, a small, classic joint that was practically empty. I picked a booth in a back corner, facing away from the front window. The clock on the wall struck exactly 7. I had barely sat down when a middle-aged man slid into the booth across from me. He looked to be in his 50s, thin, with weathered skin, and a sharp, exhausted gaze. He didn't order anything. He just stared at me. "Are you Emily?" I nodded, unable to hide my suspicion. "You're the one who texted me." Slowly, he pulled a photograph from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. I looked at it and felt my heart stop. The photo showed a young man whose face was badly burned, but I instantly recognized the shirt he was wearing. It was the exact same custom dress shirt Jason had worn to a tech conference last year. "The man who died yesterday was my nephew," he said, his voice gravelly. "His name was Mark." I was at a loss for words. "Why was your nephew wearing my husband's clothes?" "Why was he driving his car?" I asked, my voice shaking. He offered a sad, bitter smile. "Because someone paid him to die in his place." The words "die in his place" felt like an ice dagger to my chest. I pressed my lips together, trying to stay composed. "Who was it?" He looked at me intently and said slowly, "Your own husband." I felt my world crash down. Even though I was prepared for anything, hearing it from a stranger's mouth felt like my chest was being ripped open. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "Jason met with my nephew last week. Mark was drowning in debt. Loan sharks were backing him into a corner. Jason promised to clear all his debts in exchange for a job, dress up like the photo on his ID, drive a car registered to Jason, and stage a crash up on Snoqualmie Pass." I shuddered. "Do you have proof?" He sighed, pulled out his phone, and hit play on an audio file. Jason's voice rang out clearly, negotiating every detail with Mark. I listened, my ears ringing, a massive lump in my throat. "Why are you doing this?" My eyes welled up. "So my nephew didn't die for nothing." The man's face hardened. "Jason planned to use my nephew's staged death as a smokescreen so he could pull off something else." "What else?" He looked me dead in the eye. His voice dropped an octave. "Yesterday, my nephew overheard him talking on the phone with that woman. He didn't just want to fake his own death. He wanted to kill you, too." I squeezed my eyes shut, my breathing ragged. Mark's soul, his brutal death, and my own life, they were all tied together in a plot of terrifying, calculating coldness. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "My nephew is dead." A flash of agony crossed his face. "But I refuse to let the man responsible live out his days in peace. You are his next target. If you die, his crimes get buried forever." I clenched my fists, my voice hoarse. What do you want me to do? Work with me. Turn him in. Let's drag all of this into the light. I've already given my evidence to the police. But your testimony about the mountain pass? About the mistress. That's the final piece of the puzzle. I fell silent. The image of my mother-in-law sobbing uncontrollably at the hospital flashed in my mind, my father-in-law standing stoically in the hallway, and Jason, the man who was once my entire world. If I did what this man was asking, that world would be incinerated. But if I didn't, Mark would have died for nothing. I would live the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, and who knows, maybe that mountain ravine was still waiting for me. I looked at him and slowly nodded. Okay. He studied me for a long time, as if committing my face to memory, then stood up. Detectives will be in touch with you soon. From here on out, watch your back. Jason isn't the type to just roll over. With that, he turned and walked out of the diner. I was left alone with a lukewarm cup of coffee. Outside, rush hour traffic had picked up. The hospital across the street was a loud, chaotic world, entirely oblivious to my own quiet battle between life and death. I took an Uber back to the estate, walking through the front door with the calmest face I could fake. In the living room, Jason was talking quietly with his parents. Seeing me, he looked up and offered his usual tender smile. You're back. Did you get the pastries? I looked at him, feeling a hurricane raging inside me, but I just nodded silently. Breakfast was suffocating. My father-in-law barely touched his plate. My mother-in-law mostly pushed her food around. Jason was more attentive than ever, serving me food, asking if I was feeling okay. Every single gesture just made me want to throw up. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A short text from the unknown number. We have enough proof. Get ready. They're bringing your husband in first. My heart started to race. I glanced up at Jason. He was out on the balcony, talking on the phone with a faint smirk on his lips. He probably still thought he held all the cards. I realized then, this wasn't a simple game of cat and mouse anymore. It was a war between truth and murder, between a wife who used to be submissive and a husband willing to trade lives for money and freedom. That night, when the house was asleep, I stood in the middle of the bedroom, my hand resting over my stomach. For the first time in years, I didn't feel despair over my inability to have children. I felt absolute determination. If I survived this, I was going to live a completely different life. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I only knew that the second I walked out of that diner, Jason's fate and mine were officially on a collision course. I barely slept. The sound of the balcony door rattling in the wind was enough to make my chest tighten. I lay on my side, facing away from Jason, listening to his slow, rhythmic breathing. It was as if the horrific events of the past few days had nothing to do with him. I realized the man I had shared 5 years of marriage with was now a complete stranger sharing my bed. Right before dawn, my phone buzzed lightly. A text. At 9 a.m., detectives will bring Jason in again. I stared at the glowing screen for a long time, then quietly locked it. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I felt like I was standing on the final threshold of an era in my life. On one side lay 5 years of blind obedience. On the other, the cold, hard truth, about to kick the door down. Jason woke up later than usual. When he opened his eyes, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed, pretending to scroll through the news. You're up early, he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Yeah, just habit. He sat up, stretched, and looked at me for a few seconds before smiling. You've lost weight these last few days. I didn't respond. I lost weight because of the terror, the disgust, the exhaustion of acting every minute of every day. You know exactly why. But I just murmured, probably just the stress of everything. Downstairs, Arthur was already at the dining table sipping coffee. Carol was up too, but her face was gaunt, deep dark circles under her eyes. She still hadn't recovered from the shock. Arthur looked at Jason and spoke in a low rumble. Did the police call you back, son? Jason hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking his head. No, Dad. I imagine it'll take a few days. I lowered my head to pour myself a glass of water, hiding my eyes. I knew he was lying, and he didn't know that I knew. Around 8 o'clock, while we were eating, the doorbell rang. The housekeeper went to answer it. 2 state police detectives stood on the porch. Is Jason here? The dining room went dead silent. Carol dropped her fork. Arthur stood up immediately. Jason sat frozen for a few seconds before slowly rising to his feet. I'm right here. One detective held up a folded piece of paper. We need you to come with us to the precinct. We need to clear up some details regarding the accident the other day. Carol went ghost white and grabbed her son's arm. Officers, why are you taking him again? He wasn't in that car. The detective answered calmly. That is exactly what we need to clear up, ma'am. Jason turned to look at his father, and then at me. His gaze lingered on me a second longer. I clearly saw the suspicion in his eyes. Maybe he was starting to doubt not that his plan had been discovered, but doubting me, the woman he thought he had under his thumb. I'll go and come right back. Don't worry, Mom, Dad. Carol burst into tears. Honey, make sure you tell them everything. You haven't done anything wrong. I stood behind her, watching Jason being led away by the two detectives. When the cruiser doors shut, I felt as if the invisible noose that had been choking me for days finally began to loosen. The house fell into a heavy silence. Arthur sat back down, looking utterly defeated. Carol couldn't stop praying and muttering to herself. I excused myself to go upstairs. In the familiarity of my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and, with trembling hands, unlocked my phone. It started ringing. An unknown number, I answered. Emily? The detectives are interrogating Jason. He's denying everything. It was the uncle. Get ready. They could call you in at any minute. I'm ready, I replied softly. I looked up at the wedding portrait hanging on the wall. In it, Jason wore a sharp tuxedo, and I wore a flowing white gown. We were smiling, radiantly happy. Anyone would say it was the beginning of a beautiful life. Nobody knew that behind that smile, I would one day have to testify against my own husband. At noon, my phone rang again. This time it was the precinct. Emily, could you come down to the station immediately? I glanced toward the door. Downstairs, I could hear my mother-in-law coughing. I took a deep breath. Yes, I'm on my way. I lied to Carol, telling her I was running to the pharmacy to get her some vitamins. She didn't ask questions. Her mind was entirely focused on her son. I walked out of that house on my own 2 feet, without looking back. At the precinct, an officer escorted me into an interrogation room. Jason was sitting on the other side of a metal table. When he saw me walk in, his face hardened. He clearly wasn't expecting them to bring me in. A detective spoke. We invited your wife down today to clarify certain information. We expect full cooperation. Jason turned to me, his voice freezing. Emily, what are you doing here? I looked him dead in the eye. I felt calm, because there were things I couldn't hide anymore. The air in the room grew heavy, like a cinder block resting on my chest. I reached into my purse, pulled out the tiny USB drive, and placed it on the table. This is the audio file of your conversation with that woman the other night. Jason's face morphed instantly. He leaped out of his chair. What the hell are you talking about? A detective motioned for him to sit back down and plugged the USB into a laptop. The recording began to play. Every word, familiar and utterly cold. Once she's dead, the 7500 square foot estate and all the money will be yours. Jason's face drained of color, turning a sickly gray. His hands clenched the edge of the table so hard his veins bulged. I continued, my voice shaking slightly but cutting clearly through the room. The person who died in your place was Mark. He was the nephew of a man you made a deal with. I laid it all out. Everything I knew. From the text message to meet at the diner, the conversation with Mark's uncle, to the recording of Jason's deal with Mark. With every sentence, Jason's face grew paler. Finally, he let out a bitter, hollow laugh. And you believe all that garbage over your own husband? I stared at him for a long, long time. In that instant, the image of the man I once loved evaporated like smoke. I trusted you until I heard you with my own 2 ears, planning my murder. The room fell completely silent. The detective turned to Jason. Jason, with this evidence, you can't deny it anymore. I highly suggest you cooperate. Jason lowered his head and stayed quiet for a long time. When he finally looked up, there was no anger in his eyes anymore, only the sheer desperation of an animal backed into a corner. I stood up, my legs trembling. Jason, I didn't want you to die. But I couldn't die in your place like you planned, either. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw a flicker of something resembling remorse, but it was far too late. I walked out of the interrogation room, my heart hammering against my ribs. In the hallway, the midday sunlight streamed through a window, so bright it momentarily blinded me. I stood there for a while, feeling like I had just amputated a limb. I didn't know what fate awaited Jason behind that door. I only knew that the moment I placed that USB drive on the table, I had officially buried my marriage in exchange for my right to live. I walked out of the precinct as the sun began to set. The golden light stretched across the trees, casting long shadows on the gray pavement. I stopped for a moment and took a deep breath, as if I had to relearn how to breathe after ending an entire chapter of my existence. Behind those doors, Jason was still giving his statement. The man who was once my husband, my rock, was now a prime suspect in his own web of lies. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from the unknown number. "Thank you. My nephew can finally rest in peace." I stared at the message for a long time and replied, "I'm sorry it was too late. I didn't get a response. I ordered a rideshare back to the house." For the entire trip, my mind was blank. Through the window, familiar streets flickered by like frames of a movie. The route I took every morning with Jason to go to work. The steep hill where I once rode on the back of his motorcycle right after we got married. The bakery where he bought my first birthday cake as part of his family. It all felt so close, yet it already belonged to someone else. The front door of the estate opened. My mother-in-law was waiting in the foyer. As soon as I stepped in, she rushed forward, her voice frantic. "You're back! Emily, why did you take so long? And Jason, where is he?" I froze. I had rehearsed this moment the entire ride home, but facing it, I felt my chest cave in. "Jason is at the police precinct, Mom." Carol stopped short, then grabbed my arm tightly. "Again? Didn't they take him this morning? Why isn't he back?" I lowered my gaze. I couldn't keep lying. Because the detectives found new evidence. Jason is being held in pretrial detention pending further investigation. The words pretrial detention hit her like a thunderbolt. She stumbled backward, having to catch herself on the edge of the sofa so she wouldn't fall. "What are you talking about?" Arthur walked in from the patio, stopping dead in his tracks when he heard the last few words. "Detention? What does that mean?" The air in the room became unbreathable. I knew that whatever I said next would be like plunging a knife into this family, but the truth was going to come out anyway. Slowly, meticulously, I told them everything. From the night I overheard the phone call, the plot to kill me, Mark dying in Jason's place, the arrest, the charges. With every sentence, my father-in-law's face darkened, and my mother-in-law grew paler and paler. When I finished, a graveyard silence filled the massive living room. Arthur collapsed onto the sofa. His trembling hands clasped together. After a long time, he managed to speak, his voice a ragged whisper. "So, he wanted to kill you?" I nodded, tears slipping down my face without me even realizing. Yes, if Mark hadn't died, the body on that morgue slab today could have been mine. My mother-in-law broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. She wasn't beating her chest or screaming at the heavens like she had at the hospital. She slumped over the coffee table, weeping like someone who had just lost absolutely everything. Oh my God, he's out of his mind. How could he do that to his own wife? My father-in-law looked up at me, his face etched with unbearable grief and shame. "Emily, I beg your forgiveness. I failed raising him." I shook my head, a massive lump in my throat. "It's not your fault, Dad. I never imagined he would turn into this either." Suddenly, Carol lifted her head, her eyes bloodshot. "Do you still love him, Emily?" The question crushed my heart. I loved the Jason from our early years, the decent man who held my hand. But the man who tried to orchestrate my murder? I could no longer call him my love. I looked down, answering honestly. I loved him very much. But right now, I just want to live. Carol collapsed again, unable to say another word. That night, the massive house was engulfed in absolute silence. There were no footsteps in the hallway, no voice calling my name, only the heavy sighs of Arthur from his study, and the muffled, intermittent sobs of Carol from her bedroom. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling an immense, echoing void. On one side, a family destroyed by a son behind bars. On the other, me, the wife who had just sent her husband to prison to save her own life. I didn't know who was suffering more, I only knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Near midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number. Jason has been formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder, vehicular manslaughter, and identity fraud. The legal proceedings will begin in the coming days. I read the message, my hands trembling slightly. Even though I was prepared, the word charged still tore at me. The next morning, I was called in again to finalize my statement. By the time I returned, it was evening. Walking in, I saw Carol sitting in the living room. She stood up and approached me slowly. I thought she was going to blame me, to hate me. But she didn't. She just looked at me with a raspy voice. "Pack your bags." I froze. "What are you saying, Mom?" She turned her head to hide her emotion. "This house is no longer a peaceful place. You are the wife of a man going to trial. You'll suffer too much here. Go back to your parents' house for a while." I stared at her, my throat tightening. I realized she wasn't kicking me out. She was protecting me in the only way she knew how. "And Jason?" I asked quietly. She closed her eyes, tears leaking out. "He has to pay for what he's done. I can't save him anymore." I went upstairs and packed my suitcases. Every item I grabbed held a memory. The blouse he bought me for my birthday. The scarf I wrapped around him when he had a fever, it was all just fragments of a shattered timeline. When I came back downstairs, Arthur was waiting by the front door. He looked at me for a long moment and said softly, "Emily, I can't ask you to stay. But whatever happens, you were always my daughter." I bowed my head deeply. "Thank you, Dad." Carol handed me a thick envelope. "There's cash in here. Take it for your expenses. It's the only way I can help you now." I shook my head. "I can't take this." She shoved it into my hand, her voice cracking. "Take it. At least my conscience will feel a tiny bit lighter." I didn't argue anymore. I hugged her. For the first time in 5 years, we embraced not as mother and daughter-in-law, but as two women who had tumbled into the exact same abyss. Walking out that door, I knew I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving an entire life, a shattered marriage that could never be put back together. Outside, the sky was darkening and the streetlights flickered on. I dragged my suitcase down the familiar Bellevue sidewalk, feeling strangely light, as if I had just dropped a boulder I had been carrying for 5 years. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like, but I knew that from this moment on, I wasn't Jason's wife. I was just Emily, a woman who had traded her husband, her home, and her past for the right to breathe. I arrived at my parents' house late that night. The old neighborhood looked exactly the same, the yellow glow of the street lamps washing over the aging brick facades. The smell of late dinners and wood smoke mixed into a nostalgic scent that brought me to the verge of tears. My mother was sitting on the front porch in an old lawn chair. Seeing me hauling a suitcase, she shot up, her eyes wide. "Emily, what are you doing here at this hour?" Before I could even answer, the tears spilled over. I walked up the steps, dropped my bag, and threw my arms around her. "I'm home, Mom." My mom froze for a second, then hugged me fiercely. I felt her thin, familiar hands rubbing my back. "Why are you crying like this? Where's Jason? Why are you alone?" The commotion woke my dad. He stepped out the front door and stopped. "Emily?" I wiped my eyes, trying to pull myself together. "Yeah, I'm coming to stay with you guys for a while." It was a simple sentence, but my parents instantly understood something catastrophic had happened to my marriage. My mother didn't press. She brought me inside and handed me a glass of warm water. My dad sat across from me at the kitchen table, studying me for a long time before asking calmly, "What happened? Tell us." I told them everything. From the night I overheard the phone call, the plot to kill me, Mark dying in Jason's place, the arrest, and the indictment. With every word, my dad's face grew darker. My mom, sitting beside me, gripped her water glass so tightly the water rippled. When I finished, a suffocating silence settled over the small kitchen. After a long while, my dad let out a heavy sigh. Dear God. He actually tried to do it. My mom burst into tears, a muffled sob. My baby girl. They almost killed you. Why did you have to go through this? Sitting between my parents, my head bowed, I felt like I had walked down a very long, very dark road to finally find my way back home. That night, I slept in my old childhood bedroom, staring at the familiar pale yellow walls, The wooden bed frame creaked with every move. It was all so simple, yet it moved me to tears. I stared at the ceiling for hours. The image of Jason in that interrogation room burned into my mind. I didn't hate him like I had at first. I just felt a profound exhaustion, like someone who had just barely survived a hurricane. Over the next few weeks, I was called into the precinct several times to expand on my statement. My parents drove me there and back. My mom would hold my hand while we waited in the sterile hallways, as if she were terrified that if she let go, life would drag me away again. One afternoon, as I was leaving the station, I ran into Arthur by the entrance. He had lost a lot of weight. His back seemed more hunched. Seeing me, he stopped for a second before approaching. "Emily." I nodded politely. "Hi, Dad." He looked at me. His lips moved a few times before he could finally speak. "I just wanted to ask you, do you still hate him?" I stayed silent. Hate him. I had hated him to the point where I couldn't breathe. But now, after everything, I just felt a dull ache. "I don't want him dead, Dad, but I can't carry the weight of his sins either." Arthur nodded, his eyes red. "I understand. I don't blame you." He turned around in silence. Watching his hunched back walk away, I felt a deep wave of sadness. All parents love their children, but sometimes, those children take a path of no return. Days later, the detectives informed me that the woman from the phone call had fled. Slowly, her identity was revealed. She was a former employee at Jason's logistics firm, and their affair had been going on for over a year. She was the one who had pushed him to plan everything, from the proxy death to my murder in the mountains. Hearing that, I just sat in silence. It turned out that for over a year, while I was taking hormone injections to have a baby and enduring my mother-in-law's bitter critiques, my husband was living an entirely different life behind my back. Sarah came to visit me on a rainy evening. She hugged me the second I opened the door. "You are so lucky to be alive, Emily." I nodded with a sad smile. "Yeah, I'm just starting to realize that." She stayed with me for a long time, talking about trivial things to distract me. Before she left, she grabbed my hand. "What are you going to do now? File for divorce, right?" I looked out at the dark sky. The rain was coming down in sheets. "It's not an option anymore. It's a necessity." I knew that the moment Jason was indicted, one morning, I went in for a routine medical checkup the police had requested for the case. The doctor called me into her office. After reviewing my chart, she looked at me with surprise. "Emily, did you know you're pregnant?" I froze. My ears rang, my mind went totally blank. "What did you say, doctor?" "You're about 5 weeks along. It's very early." I collapsed into the chair. A baby. It was arriving right as my marriage exploded, right as its father was facing decades in prison. That night, I told my parents. My mom hugged me and cried. My dad sat quietly for a long time before asking calmly, "Do you want to keep it?" I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling that tiny, fragile life. A part of me, and a part of Jason. "Yes, the baby isn't to blame." My dad nodded. "Then we'll help you raise it." I broke down. For the first time, I wasn't crying out of fear or rage, but out of immense gratitude that I had a safe harbor. I hadn't told my in-laws. I didn't know if the news would bring them joy or just more pain, but I knew this baby was both a gift and the greatest challenge life was throwing my way. Outside, the wind howled and the rain lashed against the windows, but inside, for the first time in a very long time, a tiny spark of life was beginning to grow fragile, yet incredibly strong. The day of the trial, I attended as a victim. It was drizzling. Just like the day Sarah came to visit, my mom held my hand from the moment we left the house, her warm, trembling grip feeding me strength. "Don't be afraid. We're right here." I nodded. Inside my belly, the baby seemed to flutter, a gentle reminder that I was no longer alone. The courtroom wasn't massive, but to me, it felt like an endless cavern. Across the aisle, I saw my in-laws. Carol had aged dramatically. Her hair was almost entirely white, and she walked with a stoop. Seeing me, her eyes welled up. I offered her a slight nod. She nodded back. Then, they brought Jason in. I held my breath when I saw him. The man who was once tall, confident, and dressed in expensive suits was now wearing an Orange County jumpsuit. He looked gaunt, his face hollowed out. When his eyes locked onto mine, He stopped. In his gaze, I saw shock, deep regret, and finally, utter despair. I didn't look away. I stared back at him, much calmer than I ever thought I'd be. The trial moved methodically. The prosecution presented the evidence. The USB recording, my testimony, Mark's uncle's testimony, the forensic reports, and Jason's eventual confession. When it was his turn for a final statement before sentencing, he stood up, his hands shaking. He looked first at his parents, then at me. Emily, I'm sorry. Just 3 words, but they sounded like an entire lifetime shattering into pieces. I let greed blind me. I didn't just betray you, I tried to kill you. I don't deserve to be your husband. I don't deserve to be a son. My mother-in-law sobbed openly. My father-in-law closed his eyes, tears rolling down his deeply lined face. Jason turned back to me, his voice breaking completely. Emily, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just ask, if someday. He choked up, glancing at my slightly rounded stomach. I knew he had guessed it. Please, let me know about the baby. Even if it's just once in my life. I didn't nod and I didn't shake my head. I just looked at him for a long, long time. In that moment, there was no hate and there was no love. There was only a massive void where he used to be. The verdict was handed down. Jason was sentenced to decades in state prison for conspiracy to commit murder, manslaughter, and identity fraud. When the judge's gavel banged, I saw Carol collapse against Arthur's shoulder. He held her tight, the final embrace of 2 people who had just lost the pillar of their existence. I turned around. I didn't have the courage to watch anymore. The day we finalized the divorce, the sun was shining brightly. We didn't say a single word to each other. A few signatures, and officially, I ceased to be his wife. As I was walking out, a guard was escorting him away. Suddenly, he turned to look at me one last time. There was no calculation or threat in his eyes anymore. Just an infinite, crushing sadness. I turned and walked away before any tears could fall. Days later, Arthur came to my parents' house. His back was even more hunched. Seeing me, he stood in silence for a while before speaking. Emily, I want to ask you a favor. I invited him in and poured him some tea. Jason told me about the baby. I don't dare ask you to come back to us, or anything like that. I only ask, if someday, when the child grows up, you might allow his grandmother and me to see him, as our grandson. His eyes grew red. It's the only thing we have left. I looked down for a long time, thinking about Carol shoving that envelope of cash into my hands, about her trembling hug, about her face the day I left. Yes, when he's born, I'll let you know. Arthur stood up and bowed deeply to me. Thank you, sweetheart. When he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time. There are ties that, even when severed, leave a thread so fine it can't be used to pull you back, but it's enough to remember. Time passed slowly, but with a strange, beautiful peace. I used the money I had saved to open a small neighborhood market down the street from my parents' house, just enough to support myself and the baby. My parents helped me run it. Sarah visited often and loved to joke. After the hurricane, you finally get to see the sun, Em. I would smile, rubbing my pregnant belly. The sun I felt now didn't blind me. It kept me warm. The day I went into labor, it was pouring rain, just like the night I had come back to my parents' house crying. But this time, my tears were those of a soon-to-be mother. When I heard that first cry in the delivery room, my heart broke with sheer happiness and relief. A boy. My son. I named him Matthew, hoping he would grow up to be a man of clarity and truth. A few days later, my in-laws came to visit him. Carol, trembling violently, held him in her arms. Tears dripped onto her wrinkled hands. Hello, little one. I'm your grandma. I didn't correct her. I understood that in that moment, she just needed to be a grandmother. I didn't tell Jason the exact date of birth. I only asked Arthur to pass along a message. Your son is born. He is healthy. I will raise him to be a good man. As for the rest of our lives, let's leave them be. I don't know what Jason thought when he got the news, but I knew my life had flipped to a completely new page. I was no longer anyone's wife, nor the daughter-in-law of a wealthy dynasty. I was just Emily. A mother. Sometimes at night, with Matthew sleeping against my chest, I would remember everything that had happened. not to torture myself, but to remind myself that I had stood on the absolute edge of death, and I had walked away on my own 2 feet. Life can rip so much away from a woman, her youth, her trust, her marriage, but as long as she still has her life, as long as she holds a tiny, breathing miracle in her arms, she can always start over. And I had done just that. 3 years later, I was opening the market one morning. The sunlight spilled across the threshold. Matthew was sitting by the door, hugging an old stuffed bear and humming a commercial jingle. He had my eyes big and bright, but his nose was identical to Jason's. Whenever I noticed it, my heart would clench just a little. Then, I would quickly tell myself to let it go. The past was closed. "Mommy, can I have cookies today?" Matthew ran over and hugged my legs. "If you're a good boy and eat all your dinner, Mommy will get you cookies." He beamed, showing off his little teeth, and ran to the back to play with the store cat. My days were now incredibly simple. Open the shop in the morning, make lunch for my parents and Matthew, run the register in the afternoon, and lock up early to go to sleep holding my son. There were no more fancy galas, no 7500 square foot estates, no fake handshakes. Just the sound of my son calling Mommy when he woke up from a nap. One rainy afternoon, as I was sweeping up to close, my dad called out, "Emily, you have a visitor." I looked up. Arthur was standing in the doorway. He was much thinner now, his shoulders completely slumped, his hair totally white. Seeing me, he stood frozen for a moment before stepping inside. "Hello, Emily." "Hi, Dad." Matthew peeked out from behind my legs, curiously eyeing the stranger. "This is Matthew," I said softly. "Matthew, this is your grandpa." Arthur stood paralyzed, staring at Matthew without blinking, his lips quivering. "You're Matthew?" I nodded. Matthew shyly waved. "Hi, Grandpa." Just that single word was enough to make Arthur break down in tears. He raised a hand as if to pat the boy's head, but pulled it back, afraid of scaring him. I came to see you both." I invited him to the back room and poured him a cup of coffee. Arthur placed a small shopping bag on the table. "Toys for the boy." "You didn't have to do that, Dad." "It's not for you. It's for him." I stayed quiet. A little while later, he spoke slowly. "Jason is serving his time." At first, he was completely hollowed out. But when he found out the boy was born, it seemed like he started living with a little more purpose. He signed up for a mechanics program in the prison. He says if he ever gets out, all he wants is to know that you and the boy are okay. I felt a tiny prick in my heart, but nothing more. Arthur looked at me, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't dare ask you to forgive him. He burned all his own bridges. I just want you to not live your life consumed by hatred." I looked up and met his eyes. "I don't hate him anymore, Dad. I just don't feel anything for him." He nodded very slightly. When Arthur left, Matthew ran after him and handed him a piece of candy. "Here you go, Grandpa." Arthur stopped. He crouched down, took the candy with a shaking hand, and thanked him. I watched his hunched back disappear into the rain. I stood at the door for a long time. That night, I asked Matthew, "Did you like Grandpa?" "Yeah." "He was sad," Matthew replied, with a childhood sincerity that left me deep in thought. Months later, Arthur brought me a letter from Jason. The handwriting was shaky, nowhere near as precise as it used to be. "Emily, I don't dare ask for your forgiveness. I just want to tell you that I finally understand what it means to pay for your actions. Every night in this cell, I dream of you and the boy, but I know it's a dream I have no right to be a part of anymore. I just hope you are both safe and well." I finished reading it and folded it slowly. I didn't write back. Not out of spite, but because I knew our paths were permanently severed. Some things, once shattered, can never be glued back together. On Matthew's first day of kindergarten, he refused to let go of my hand. "Mommy, come with me. Come inside the class. Mommy will wait right here at the door." He pressed his lips together and with glossy eyes, walked inside. When the classroom door shut, I stood in the hallway feeling like a small piece of my heart had just walked away. That night, Sarah stopped by the market. "Emily, have you thought about starting over? With someone else?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, a woman has the right to be happy a second time." I laughed. "I am happy. She stared at me for a long time, then smiled. Yeah. Happy your own way. That night, I held Matthew as he slept, feeling an overwhelming peace. I was no longer afraid of the dark. I didn't jump at secret phone calls. I didn't live in an echoing, freezing mansion. I lived in a small, warm home. There are scars that never fade, but you learn to live with them until they stop hurting. Jason was a scar on my life, but Matthew was the warmth that covered it every single day. I had walked out of hell on my own 2 feet, and now I was walking down a different path, one without luxury or millions, but one where I was free to be a mother and free to be myself. 18 years later, on the day Matthew got his college acceptance letter, the sun was brilliant. "Mom, I got in," he yelled from the front door, waving the envelope. I ran to him, my hands shaking worse than his. "Really?" "Yeah, computer science at UW." I threw my arms around him, and for the first time in many years, I cried like a child. That evening, Matthew sat next to me on the porch. "Mom, I want to ask you something. What was my dad really like?" I stayed quiet for a long time. "Your dad was once the person I trusted more than anyone in the world. Are you still mad at him?" I smiled softly. "I used to be. But now, I can't even picture his face." I turned to look at him. His profile looked so much like Jason's in that moment. "Do you want to see him?" He nodded, dead serious. "I don't want to yell at him or anything. I just want to know where I come from." I took a deep breath. "If you want to, I won't stop you." The visit to the state penitentiary happened on a morning of light drizzle. When Jason walked into the visiting room, I barely recognized him. He was incredibly thin, his shoulders slumped, his face lined with premature wrinkles. But when he saw Matthew, his eyes lit up like fireworks. "Hi, Dad," Matthew said, nodding his head. Just those 2 words were enough to make Jason break down sobbing. "You're so tall. Are you doing okay?" "I'm doing great. Just being alive is enough," Matthew replied calmly. I hung back, watching them. All the hatred and terror from decades ago suddenly felt like a different lifetime. Jason turned to me. "Emily, you raised an incredible man." I just nodded. "Because he's my son." Before leaving, Matthew stood up. "I don't know exactly what you did in the past, Dad, but I hope that starting today, you try to live a little better." Jason nodded frantically, unable to stop the tears. "I promise you." "I promise." On the drive back, Matthew looked over at me. "Mom, I finally understand why you chose to live the way we do." I smiled. "You don't blame me?" "No. I'm just incredibly proud of you." Those words made my soul tremble. I thought I was just a lucky survivor, but to my son, I was a mother to be proud of. And that was enough for a lifetime. The day Matthew married Lucy, a sweet girl from a modest family, we had a simple backyard wedding. Arthur came and watched from a quiet corner in the back. During the reception, Matthew walked over and hugged me tight. "Mom, thank you for raising me to be a good man." I hugged him back, tears streaming down my face. Living a decent life is the best gift you could ever give me. A year later, my granddaughter was born. Matthew sprinted into the house yelling, "Mom, I'm a dad!" I held the tiny baby girl in my arms, my hands trembling. Life is a strange, beautiful circle. I was once a woman nearly murdered by her husband. I gave birth in solitude. And now, I was holding my granddaughter amidst laughter and tears of pure joy. Arthur passed away a few years later. I visited him in the hospital before the end. I forgave him, and he asked for my forgiveness. Jason eventually got out on parole. Arthur had told me he opened a small auto repair shop out in the sticks. He lived quietly. We never saw each other again. There are some encounters better left purely as memories. One afternoon, sitting on the porch with my granddaughter sleeping in my lap, I felt absolute peace. I had walked through hell. I had stood on the precipice of death. But in the end, I had completed a cycle of pain only to return to the simplest thing of all. Family. I am Emily. I loved. I made mistakes. I almost died. I gave birth through tears. But I also stood back up, kept walking forward, and held on to the light for the entire lifetime that followed.
Don't pity me. My heart doesn't need your mercy. I can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, fell deeper than I thought I would. But pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection. Now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll learn to breathe again. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll rise alone again. I'll rise alone again. Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger. Maybe I'll learn how to speak. But for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you.